Today I'm going to be sharing with you guys a what we eat in a week video. So if you're new here, I am a mother of 7 children. My oldest is 12 and my youngest is 16 months, and I'm expecting our 8th baby, and I'm about 25-ish weeks along in my pregnancy. I say ish because I'm not exactly sure how many weeks I'll be when this video goes live. But on this particular day, I actually am going to focus on budget-friendly meals that I make for my large family. And I'm gonna give you guys several tips along the way that I do to try to keep our grocery bill down. And I'm sure that's something that everybody is trying to do this day and age whenever groceries have gone up so much. So on this first day, now some of these are going to be lunches and some dinner, just depending on what meal I decided to film on that particular day. But on this first meal, it is a lunch, and I am making burger bowls. This is something that I've been making for lunch quite a bit lately. I would say about every other week, if not once a week. It's just so easy to make, and it's one of those meals that you can do on a whim. So this often becomes our Monday lunch. I've talked about this a lot on my channel, and my favorite way to meal plan, if you will, it's not really meal planning at all. And basically all I do is set out meat at the beginning of the week so that I have meat defrosted in my refrigerator. And then I just go from there as far as what meal I'll be making. We buy all of our meat in bulk, and so we have all of the cuts of meat. We raise and butcher our own hogs every year, so that means we get a lot of different cuts of pork. We buy beef and chicken from my sister, and again, we get all of the different cuts. And my husband and a few of my older kids all like to deer hunt, and so soon we'll be filling our freezer with a bunch of venison. So with this, we get all of the cuts of meat, and sometimes they are harder ones to cook, like maybe a roast or a whole ham. And then there's easier cuts of meat like ground meat and bacon, but every cut has to be cooked. So my method is not really thinking through what I'm going to make, just putting meat out in the refrigerator, and then I am forced to cook whatever is defrosted at the mealtime. And so today I'm making burger bowls, and the main reason for this is because sometimes on Mondays I forget to lay out meat the night before if we get home late, and so obviously burger meat can be made from frozen. So that makes it a really easy meal that you can do. I'm always thinking of things with ground beef, typically happens on a Monday, but other times throughout the week too. And I'm also adding some bacon to top these with. Now, if you want to make these really cost effective, you do not have to put bacon on these. Basically, a burger bowl is everything you could think of that would go on a burger inside a bowl minus the bun. So I go heavy on the lettuce, and then we top it with burger. Like I said, today I'm doing bacon, and for us that's very inexpensive because we raise our own hogs, and so that's practically free. But if you are trying to do a budget, you can definitely leave the bacon out. Also, if you are like us here in the Midwest, we're coming out of garden season, so there's lots of garden vegetables that are still easy to come by. We go to Awanas at a church on Thursdays every week, and there's always a box of tomatoes and just fresh vegetables and even fruit out. And so I always grab some of that because they're free. And as many of you know, we moved this year, and so we didn't garden as much as I normally would have because we moved right at the time of planting. Now I'm also frying up a bunch of potatoes because that makes a really good filling topping to go with this. And then I make my own homemade sauce because that's kind of like the main thing to make this really delicious. You mix together mayonnaise, which I make on my own to avoid any bad ingredients, and also it makes it a lot cheaper. If you're trying to buy like an avocado based mayonnaise, that's really expensive, but making it from home is rather cheap. Has some dill in there and some pickle juice. Look up a burger bowl recipe, and you can pretty much put any toppings you want in it and then just follow the sauce recipe. And if your family's anything like mine, you guys will love it and it will become a favorite. All right, so on this next day, I'm actually cooking this meal kind of throughout the day. I am making some pulled pork again. This cut of meat for our family is very inexpensive because it came from our own hogs that we raised. And then I'm making some buns to go with this with whole grains. Now, if you haven't made the switch to whole grains yet, I know it can sound a little bit daunting at first because it's, you're grinding your own flour and the texture is a little bit different. But it is a really great way to save on groceries. I try to make all of our bread, baked goods, products in my house homemade, and it actually is very cheap because we buy our grains in bulk. If you guys will kind of notice throughout this video, one of my biggest tips is buying in bulk. It really can save a lot of money. And so we buy these grains in bulk, and then there's really not too many other ingredients that go into bread making. When water, a little bit of honey, some oil or butter, depending on what kind of recipe you're making. So it's a really great way to get whole grains into your diet and also save a bunch of money. Now, I'm also making my own homemade barbecue sauce. This is another thing that I strive for. Now, if you're like me, I don't just go to the grocery store and buy the cheapest barbecue sauce. I'm going to look at all the ingredients and definitely going to splurge for the more expensive one because I don't like all the ingredients in like a very traditional barbecue sauce. And so instead of doing that, it's so much cheaper again just to make your own. So that's what I'm doing here. So then I'm just going to put my roast in my Instapot with the barbecue sauce and some spices and let that cook, work on my buns. And then I'm also going to make a homemade coleslaw to go with this. And it's kind of funny, the coleslaw is what inspired my meal today. When I was at the grocery store, they had coleslaw mix on sale. And so I picked that up, and that's another tip that I have and something that I always look for is things that are on sale. Maybe some produce that's about to go bad that I know I can use up right away, or even fruit that's going to go bad that you can cut up and freeze for smoothies or to make, yogurt parfaits or something, but always looking for deals on things that are on sale, even if it's something that's about to go bad. I find if I'm able to use it quickly, it's usually totally fine, and then I'm able to save a little bit on my grocery bill by doing that. This afternoon, after my little ones wake up from their nap, we're actually going to be heading to our farm to check on the built site. We have lots of things going on there. I'm excited. I'm going to be doing a update on the house video coming soon. We have so much going on. Things are moving fast and we couldn't be more excited. So you're going to get a little peek of it, but I'm actually packing this for dinner there, and that is another big tip I have. Now, this might be more of a tip for a larger family. So for me to go to the store and buy enough deli meat that's, kind of higher quality, because I don't want nitrates or added things into my meat, and sliced cheese and bread and maybe some like chips or condiments to make my family sandwiches would cost a lot, and it's just so much that I would need. So instead, pulling out a big roast from my freezer that, you know, from the hog that we raised, and making some homemade buns and some coleslaw that I got on sale, I can make a much cheaper and way healthier meal for my family than doing like packed sandwiches. And so that is something that I try to do. Now, obviously, we don't always do this. I definitely pack sandwiches. We eat peanut butter and jelly sometimes. Like, we don't have this like perfect diet all the time. So for me, with having a larger family and lots of little mouths to feed, it definitely makes sense for me to make a big roast to do like pulled pork sandwiches rather than buying all the things to make like regular deli meat sandwiches at the store. And I don't know about you, but I think this is so much more tasty. Now, normally I would add some more barbecue sauce on top of this meat, but because we're eating it out on the farm, I decided that it would probably be best to keep it where it wasn't quite as juicy, just to cut down on the mess. I'm taking a little break from cooking in the kitchen to thank today's video sponsor, Birch Living. You guys know that I love to create healthy recipes to feed my family using organic ingredients and fresh local produce. And I strive to use organic products in other areas of my home, and one of those is right here in my bedroom. You actually spend a third of your life in bed, so it's really important that this area is healthy just as much as the food that you're cooking and the nutrition that you're putting into your body. Birch makes mattresses that are created with natural wool, organic latex, and organic cotton. Birch uses zero polyurethane based foams. That means there's no off-gassing while you sleep. They are Green Guard Gold certified, and unlike other companies, all of their mattresses are always 100% fiberglass free. We have been sleeping in the Birch Luxe mattress for over 3 years now, and we couldn't be happier. We actually got this mattress when my 3-year-old, right before he was born, and I was really excited to switch over to an organic mattress before having a baby, because I like to keep my babies in bed with me a lot right after they're born, and I don't want them having to breathe in that off-gassing that can come off of other mattresses. And since then, we've had another baby and I'm expecting another one. And I also love how comfortable the Birch mattress is. I can get a really good sleep even while I'm pregnant, and my husband is a little bit more picky about mattresses because he oftentimes has a bad back or he's sore because he's always working and lifting heavy things. And he even commented how comfortable it was whenever we switched over to this several years ago. So that is a win-win for me. As we get closer to welcoming another sweet baby into our family, it is so important to me to have an organic mattress. And after a lot of research, we settled on Birch, and I am so glad that we did. Right now, you can get 20% off your Birch mattress by using my link down in my description box below, so you guys can make sure to check that out. And thanks again to Birch Living for sponsoring today's video. All right, so I'm back in the kitchen. This is another day, and I'm gonna show you guys a dinner that I am making. And on this day, I'm making lasagna soup. I think I made this last year sometime in the fall or winter when it was a little bit cooler, and then completely forgot about it until now. But I was reminded once again that my family loves this meal. If you've never made lasagna soup, try it. I think I actually got this recommendation from someone in my comments on YouTube. Maybe I made a lasagna or something, and someone asked, have you ever tried lasagna soup? And it It's really, really tasty. You're basically think that you're getting like all the things that normally go in lasagna, minus all the cheese. I'll talk about that in a minute. And then you add in a bunch of broth to it to make it more like soup. And then you make the cheese mixture separate. You could do ricotta then, but if you want to save money and be budget friendly, you can do cottage cheese. That's a lot cheaper than ricotta cheese. At least it is where I live. And then mozzarella and some Parmesan cheese. And then that like goes on top of the soup. It's so good. And on this particular day, it was raining outside, a little bit cooler. And so it just felt like the best day to whip up a nice big batch of soup. I'm making my sauce with some marinara, a little bit of tomato paste, and then also with broth. Now, another way that I really like to cut back on my grocery bill is using only whole chicken. So instead of getting the different cuts of chicken, now I will say there are some times when there are certain recipes that I have that I want to use like chicken breasts for, but I strive to just buy all whole chickens. Whole chickens are cheaper, and then you can save the bones and use those bones to make bone broth. It's a very nutrients dense food that you can add into your diet, and it's pretty much free. If you're saving all your bones, you can just add those into some water instead of throwing away any vegetable scraps that when I'm cooking, I always save all of those peels and add that in with my bones, and it makes a very delicious broth that basically is free, and that cuts down on ever having to buy bone broth from the store. I don't know exactly how much it costs, but I'm sure buying like organic bone broth from the store would be, I don't know, several dollars per container, and this is something that I don't ever have to spend any money on. Now with this soup, I am making some Red Lobster copycat biscuits, those like cheddar herb biscuits. I don't know what made me think of these, but I was like, oh my gosh, I want to make those. I've like probably been to Red Lobster like twice in my life, but the biscuits are so good. So I decided to make those. I just looked up a recipe and I am copying it mostly. Obviously I'm using whole grains that I freshly milled. So a few things that are different, but they turned out really delicious, and they just made a good little addition to this meal. And again, when you are using whole grains, you can kind of whip these up pretty inexpensively, and then it would make this meal stretch a little further. I did use pork sausage in this. You could use beef or ground turkey or whatever. Again, look for things that are on sale, but for me, while we have a freezer full of pork, that is the most inexpensive meat for me to use, so that's why I chose to put that meat in my lasagna soup, and it was really good. If you can find a deal on pork, or you have some ground pork in this soup, is very delicious. I did actually pay attention to how I made this lasagna soup, and I got the recipe on my cooking blog. So this is something that you want to make. You guys can look that up. It's on castironskilletcooking.com. All right, so for this next meal, I'm making a honey garlic chicken, and I'm going to serve it over rice. I'm sure everyone knows that rice is a budget-friendly option. I try to do either a rice or a pasta or a potato or something at most meals. I like to have lots of protein and fat, but if you add in one of those other ingredients that I was saying, it really is a great way to cut down on your grocery budget. It will stretch your meal into something just a little bit further if you can add that. So for this particular day, I am making up some rice. Now, one way I make rice a little bit healthier is I like to cook it in my homemade bone broth. And then I like to add in some type of fat. So sometimes I do a big scoop of lard, which we have from our pigs, or I'll do like a thing of butter or something just to add in some fat to the grain to make it a little bit healthier. I actually have this recipe on the Cast Iron Skillet Cooking blog also if you guys want to make it, but I made a little breading for my chicken just with some arrowroot powder. You could also use cornstarch or flour and some seasonings, and then I added them into a pan with some oil, and then I made up my own sauce. Now anytime I have a recipe that calls for soy sauce, I typically use coconut aminos just to make it a little bit healthier. I try to stay away from soy products, and one way I find to make that a little bit cheaper, like buying coconut aminos and different condiments that I do buy, like I said earlier, I try to home make as many as I can, but if not, I try to buy from either a co-op or from Thrive Market. Typically those places are going to be much cheaper than your local grocery store. A huge budget tip that I have is to save every bit from your food. I already kind of mentioned this with the bones and the vegetable scraps, but this is also important if you have a good source of meat to save your grease, and then you can use that instead of butter in certain recipes, like I was saying with the lard or even with tallow. So rendering off the fat and using that for different things. I never get rid of bacon grease if it's a good source of bacon. The grease is a great thing to save, and then in the morning I'll use that to fry my eggs in, or just for different recipes. Just the other day I was making some roasted potatoes and I used some bacon grease to cover those in, and then I don't have to use avocado oil or olive oil. It's a really great way to save on your grocery bill and also get some more healthy fats into your diet. This last meal that I'm going to share with you guys is a bacon pasta with a creamy sauce. Now this is a recipe that I kind of just made up as I went. I do this often, like sometimes I'll even kind of look up a recipe, see what they did, kind of get like a basic idea, and then I will substitute for what I have on hand. So on this particular recipe, I am frying up a bunch of bacon, and then I'm going to, in the bacon grease, saute some garlic and then some different vegetables. You could do all sorts of things here. I had tomatoes and onions in my fridge, so that's what I'm using. And then I am going to add in some spinach a little bit later on because I still have some from my lasagna soup recipe from earlier in this week. But you could put in zucchini, you could do peppers, lots of different things. And then I was planning on making like a Parmesan cream sauce with this, but I realized I didn't have any Parmesan cheese. So instead I'm using some cream cheese that I already had in the refrigerator. And that's something that I also try to do often, is not let anything go to waste. That's really important. But also just using what I have. Instead of running out to the store and buying something else, just using the ingredients that I have on hand. And I can kind of change the recipe up if needed and still make it super delicious, but you know, just kind of use what you have. And then again, a lot of times I can find these spring mix lettuces on sale. They're on their way out, like they're you know, they're almost bad, but if you use them right away, it's a great way to save on your grocery bill. Sorry about my shaky camera. Anytime I am filming, there's usually a kid or 2 or 5 at my feet, and anytime they walk through or hit the tripod, the camera shakes. So that's what is causing that when you see it. But I hope this video gave you guys some great meal inspiration and that you are inspired to make some budget-friendly meals this week. Thank you guys so much for watching, and if you're new here, I get out a new video every single week.